Welcome, everyone. We have Karen Lowe here to talk about a 4-day work week and with Kahn, who's also going to share the data from the project. And I don't know, many of you, I think, were here when Ali presented a few years ago, or a few years ago. I guess it wasn't that long ago. A few months ago on his shape-powered flourishing assessment diagnostic. So this is going to hopefully just bring it all to life. I'll just do a really quick intro. Karen Lowe is a director of 4-Day Week Global, and she'll present the latest developments in the global movement towards 4-Day Work Week, sharing insights from recent case studies that highlight the transformative impact on organizations and employees. She'll also explore the concept of shape-powered flourishing, i.e. Kahn, discussing how the principles of the 4-Day Work Week align with and promote holistic well-being and workplace flourishing. Karen is also an advocate for flourishing workplaces in addition to the acting director of 4-Day Week Global in South Africa. She's the co-founder and chief energy officer of Human Energy, an organization committed to helping businesses human better. She's a respected consultant, strategic advisor, expert in communications and advocacy, and engaging public speaker. Don't you love when people read your bios live?
Oh, no pressure, Karen.
No pressure. We are all in good company and we're all aligned on flourishing. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Karen, and really wonderful to be here this evening or early evening for myself and Ali. Well, Ali, you're still afternoon. I'm in Cape Town at the moment and in the middle of summer. I'm not too sure where you are all around the world, but I'm sure we have some diverse audience sets. Just to warn you, South Africans tend to be slightly crazy. We do live up to our reputations. And I have another nickname, which is per second billing. So I tend to go at a very, very fast and very excitable pace. So if I'm screaming ahead and nothing is making sense, please feel free to stop me. I also tend to use my outside voice because I am a mom of 2 teenage boys, so I have no problems projecting. So if I go into teacher or mom mode, you'll know well what's happened. I'm probably glaring at some hairy, stinky teenager that's trying to come into my workspace. So let me share my screen, and I hope this is not going to be death by PowerPoint. I'm going to share some of the data that we've learned from the trials around the world, and then I'm going to dive into a specific case study, which is very dear to my heart as well as Ali's heart, and really just try and bring how a shorter work week and flourishing come together. And Ali and I are on a journey and have been for about 2 years together, really just exploring that, the idea of time scarcity versus time abundance, and how we can promote more flourishing ecosystems and create conditions in organizations that really promote flourishing. And it is a long road, isn't it, Ali? It's something that we are really having to explain and educate. And I always say that the 4-day week is either it's a bit like an insect repellent. Sometimes I can go, hi, I'm Karen from 4-Day Week Global, and you can see people looking for the exit. It's like, how do I get out of here? Or they lean in and they want to hear everything that I have to say. It is not the easiest argument to convince people to work a shorter work week without compromising productivity and performance. But it is my joy and privilege and passion to be doing so, and my hope to leave a legacy of more flourishing workplaces as I reflect back in 10 years' time. So let me jump straight into the presentation and hope my screen works, which it is going to do. So technology is on my side, which is fantastic. Can you all see my screen? Fantastic. Right, that was a pre-COVID picture and I look nothing like that anymore. So let's move right along. But the topic today is flourishing in time, and really exploring how a shorter work week or the 4-day week is transforming workplaces and lives. And I've had the privilege and honor of working with companies across the world, both big and small, across multiple sectors, hearing their stories and witnessing their move and transition to a 4-day week. And it has been a truly wonderful awakening and learning curve for me. And it has turned into a true passion. Now my clicker is not working. Right, next one. I don't know about you, but 2024 was a year. It was a year. And 2025, I think everyone is approaching it with a lot of hope, but the struggle is real. We are constantly seeing workplaces that are not flourishing. They're struggling, they're languishing. Some are striving, but there are very few out there that have really made that transition and understood all of the different elements that contribute towards a flourishing workplace at an employee level, at a management level, and at an executive level. And I think the struggle is a personal struggle. It's felt as an individual. The stories that I have been told is not just executives and owners of businesses, but it's employees that are explaining how they've gone from depleted to feeling more autonomous and have more control in their lives, to having better time satisfaction, etc. So really, it's about recharging and creating a rest ethic and creating a permissive culture where there is a balance. And I don't like work-life balance, but it's about rebalancing work and life. And we know that the current model that we have, which is close to 100 years old, is not a sustainable model. And Ali and I have many discussions about this, but time is our most precious resource. And I feel that the traditional 5-day week just robs us of that time. And what we're trying to do as an organization at Global is really giving people back the currency of time so that they can spend it on what truly matters to them. And time back, and the gift of time back, is very, very personal. It could be, for me, helping my dad with his heart condition. It could be running back to school. It could be helping my teenage son find a job on the boats. It could be volunteering. It could be any number of things that individuals will take on board with that gift of time back. But it is a currency, and make no mistake. So by rethinking and redesigning the way we work, we are really trying to shape a future world of work that supports and does not hinder flourishing. And I think this is particularly pertinent for me in South Africa, given that we have one of the youngest populations in the world. Our largest segment of the population are aged 13 to 24. And we have a huge discrepancy compared to other European and developing countries, where their demographics tell a very different stories of aging populations, etc. So I'm going to try and balance a global story with a South African narrative here, and I hope I manage to pull it off. So you're in for a treat today. We're going to start with a history lesson. I'm going to build a case for a shorter work week, hopefully successfully. We're going to share a transformation story. Ali is going to speak to how we can flourish in time better, and how we are using shape and shape diagnostics to enable organizations to achieve that. And then we will finish with an Ask Me Anything session. So let's start with that history lesson. Where did Global start from? So Andrew Barnes and Charlotte Lockhart. Andrew Barnes specifically was on a plane. He was the owner and founder of Perpetual Guardian, one of the biggest trust and asset management organizations in New Zealand. And he decided that he wanted to experiment with the concept of productivity against the backdrop of reduced hours working. So he went out with the hypothesis: if I shorten the work week, is it going to adversely affect productivity and performance? Or will it have any knock-on or poor effect on customer service and profitability? And that was back in 2017. And that was literally a small experiment done in Perpetual Guardian. That is where the original white paper came from, for those of you that are not familiar with the 4-day week. And fast forward, we are now a truly global organization with 21 country partners around the world. I am one of those country partners. So whilst I'm a director of the global brand as well, I am the country partner in South Africa. And if you have a look at this map, we are working with Chile, with Brazil, obviously with the US and Canada, but we have Spain, Germany, Switzerland, France. And as you cast your eye across, you can see that we're moving into India. We've obviously got very strong presence in Australia and New Zealand, because that's where our founders are from. But there is a big upswing in Europe at the moment, and foreign language countries. And it's very, very exciting to see. So South Africa was the 5th country partner and the 5th country in the world to pilot or trial the 4-day week. And subsequent to that, we now, within the last 18 months, have now 21 partners around the world that are running various programs to advocate for shorter work weeks and to train organizations on how to transition successfully to a shorter work week. The core team, the founders, Andrew Barnes and Charlotte Lockhart, and the directors, myself, Rebecca, Debbie, and our consultant partner and representing South America is Gabriela Brazil. But the true heroes of the story really are the partner network that we've established. So as I said, we've signed Finland and Poland as well since I've updated the slides. So actually, I should be saying 23. But we've got some incredible partners around the world, as far afield as Israel as well. And over 16 top academic partners around the world that are doing some phenomenal research in the subject of 4-day week. So Juliet Shaw really pioneering the way with the pilot data from Boston College, but partnering with various research and academic institutions around the world to really understand the on-the-ground impact of the 4-day week within a specific geographic territory. Let's have a little bit of a brag, because for a small little company, we've certainly managed to bag a couple of awards and recognitions. So, I'm a communicator, so have to do a bit of a brag. So Fast Company times 100, and our former CEO, Dale, actually received recognition from Forbes 30 Under 30 last year. So really, for a small company, making big impact with big dreams. Before we go any further, and I'm not sure how many of you are 100% familiar with the 4-day week, but I really do always like to start with a bit of misconception. So I'd like to really start here, which is the 180-100 principle and framework, which the 4-day week is founded on. So this is not a compressed work week. This is about keeping pay at 100%. It's about reducing the average work week by 20%, regardless of baseline, whilst getting and maintaining 100% output and productivity. So no change to pay or leave, a 20% reduction in the average work week, whether it's 50 down or whether it's like the Frenchies who I always say want to go from 36 to 32. So it's not a full 20%, but 100% productivity. And essentially, this is a productivity experiment. It started as a productivity experiment with a happy accident from a flourishing perspective and well-being perspective. So let me build a bit of a case and give you some insights and share some insights from a 4-day week global perspective. What we're doing is challenging a 100-year-old status quo. We have the 5-day week, which was designed in the era of manufacturing almost 100 years ago, in the era of Tom Ford. And I'm sure if you actually go and Google and look up some pictures of those era, it wasn't a production line that had robots and was, it was human. The production line was human. But the 5-day week places an emphasis on long hours and presenteeism as the markers of productivity. We're shifting all of these markers across employee experience, impact on rest, broader impact on the environment, and the broader impact on business. We are challenging organizations to completely rethink the relationship that they have with time, stop being obsessed with the 40-hour work week and 5 days a week, and ask themselves the question, under what circumstances can a reduced work week, 32 hours being the optimal across a lot of industries, under what circumstances can a reduced work week produce optimal work-life balance, reduce stress, increase job satisfaction without impacting or having any adverse effect on productivity and performance? And our pilots around the world have shown very, very, very similar results. I don't want you to read the slide. I should have actually put a bar across it that says the 4-day week is not a Friday off. And I think that is probably the biggest misconception out there within the business community and indeed with individuals. They all assume it's a 3-day weekend and that businesses close and shut down on a Friday and everyone goes home early. That is not the case. It is preferred. Fridays are generally preferred, but only by 50% of our samples. It could be a Monday off, it could be a Wednesday off, it could be 2 half days, or it could indeed be time off every day. So the way organizations redesign their average work week is bottom up, and it really does require of them to challenge their systems, their thinking, how they look and measure productivity and performance, how they're measuring employee engagement and job satisfaction. So most businesses are concerned about a drop in productivity. Others are very concerned and say, well, why must we keep the 100% pay? They're always looking to save money. So a lot of businesses come to us and they're either working compressed hours, so they've reduced the work week to 4 days, but they're actually working a 10-hour days, which is not the 4-day week. So it's really, really important, just while we move into this presentation, for you to understand that the data that I'm presenting to you here today is all around the 180-100 trademark principle. And really, the job is to move the conversation of around the clickbait that is the 4-day week, which we can all relate to at a human level. Work less, do more, have better work-life satisfaction. But organizations are resisting it, as they do most change. However, we've got some early adopters, and we've worked with close to 400 organizations around the world now since its inception. So a snapshot view, its impact is both businesses succeeding as well as societal impact. And as we move into more pilots, we are getting more and more research data that's coming at us, and we're getting more sort of vertical or deep niched, I always forget the word, those sort of vertical studies that we do, where we understand the impact in an industry, and more scientific impact, which is obviously where Ali and Shape come in. But businesses are succeeding. We're seeing increased productivity. We are seeing improved work-life balance. We are seeing enhanced engagement and improvements in morale. We are seeing direct cost savings in terms of reduced turnover and absenteeism reductions. And I think by far the sort of winning element of the shorter work week in certain industries is talent management, or attraction and retention of talent. We know that there's a skills shortage in a number of industries around the world. I mean, the IT tech sector, many industries. But a lot of other organizations that we're working with are increasingly seeing the 4-day week as potentially an employee value proposition that offers a significant competitive edge to attract and retain talent. And then obviously, as a result, lowering turnover. And we've had some big companies. Medibank is a listed company in Australia. It's the biggest insurance company in Australia. They started with a little trial, they've doubled the sample, and they've just come back to us early this year to say that they are continuing to expand and roll out the trial across different departments. We've had success in the City of Golden Police Department in Denver, Colorado. And I always say when I present that if it can work in a police department where it's 24/7, it can work anywhere. Atom Bank, very, very well-known case study, an online bank that went from the 9th most sought-after bank to work for to the 3rd most sought-after bank to work for during their UK trial back in 2022. So we're seeing trade unions in Iceland experiment. We're in discussions with the biggest trade union in the Netherlands. We're speaking to B Corp, B Labs. We're speaking to purpose-driven organizations and nonprofits around the world, to insurance, financial, tax and advisory services. Marketing communications is an enormous industry. And more recently, we're starting to see psychosocial clients come to us. So we find that the 4-day week hits a sweet spot and doesn't act like an insect repellent in organizations that are purpose-driven and purpose-led and have passionate workforces that tend to lean towards overwork anyway. We're also starting to see that the impact on society is potentially being felt. So across the world, governments are discussing it. I'm not too sure the media is doing a particularly good job of promoting it. I think the one headline on the Telegraph was "Rage" as someone presented it in the UK. His name escapes me, but it certainly is a bit divisive. But it is making it up to policy level, and all of our partners are engaging with policymakers and trade unions, regardless of where they are from a geographic perspective. But what are the business outcomes? So if we take the trial data and we aggregate all the pilots to date, just a caveat, this does not include the German trial results, which were released late last year. So there's all the trial data, excluding Germany. These were the sort of aggregated outcomes. So the overall trial experience with us was very positive. We had revenue positive and productivity positive environments. We had this intent to continue. So we're seeing a lot of organizations, even 2 years on, still refining and transitioning towards a 4-day week. This is not something that you switch on. It's something you transition towards and master as you move through the different trials. Revenue up, hiring increased, absenteeism decreasing, resignation and sick days falling. All obviously data sets compared to 6 months of the trial compared to 6 months of the previous year. So the gains are being seen in productivity, in performance, in the recruitment environment. So really that's that talent attraction, but also the retention components. Obviously, the costs of recruitment and continuously needing to recruit are very high. So big cost savings. 55% reporting an increase in sort of the workability. So employees feeling more engaged, feeling more productive and able to do their work. But I think the hero of the story, and this is where we start moving into the flourishing side of things, is what impact it's had on well-being. So we're seeing that 73% of the workers are expressing that greater satisfaction with their time and are seeing that direct impact. They're feeling less burnt out, they're feeling less stressed, and there's definitely a reduction in negative sentiment towards their employer and work. Sustainability is increasingly on our agenda. We haven't had too much data on sustainability, but there's a big focus for us this year to move into the ESG space. There's definitely we're starting to see some good data coming through on gender equality. My husband hates it when I bring up this slide, but really sort of reducing barriers to women achieving senior positions at work, and also the impact on childcare costs. So bringing men in to take a greater share of the housework and childcare. So really unlocking potential gender equality as we move. And I think this last point was pervasive across all of the organizations we've worked with. It really, moving into the 4-day week space, puts all of these organizations into a problem-solving mode. And they find that as a result, their employees are more innovative, progressive, and forward-thinking. So, that promotes growth. So these are really the aggregated markers across the data sets. So quickly to summarize, the impact of free time on our world really is in health, more time to be healthy. It's in equity, more time to build parity, and definitely in the future, more time to be sustainable. And there are all sorts of compelling reasons and arguments for these. Let's unpack these a little bit more. So more time to be healthy. The mental health markers, as we've reported and predicted outwards, burnout dropping, stress dropping, fatigue dropping, anxiety levels dropping, sleep improving, insomnia dropping, physical activity improving. And this was fascinating for me. The physical activity markers, for the first time ever in the German trial, which concluded late last year, we had a control group. It was the first pilot in the world to have a control group, and University of Munster, Professor Bachmann, had a control group where the employees were wearing wearables, and they literally tracked the physiological impact on exercise, and so went so far as to take hair samples to test cortisol levels. And we're actually anxiously waiting those results. They should be in within the next couple of weeks. And then obviously reported improvements in time satisfaction. More time to build equity. Well, second shift labor, benefits for women and women in the workplace, that reduction in that work-family conflict consistently being reported across trials, and reductions in childcare costs. More time to be sustainable, reductions in average commutes, reported reductions in energy consumption, promoting pro-social behavior, so whether that's volunteering, and it's very big in South Africa, as it is in many countries around the world. And then moving into reductions in carbon footprints, obviously fuel emissions, etc. Not having to commute, reductions in daily headcount, driving costs down. The case for sustainability from an environmental perspective is to be made and researched as we go. But let's move on to the story of transformation and the hero of the day. As a South African, we're always in the media for the wrong reasons. And as a developing country, we have a massive divide between the haves and the have-nots. And the 4-day week trial in South Africa, the pilot trial, which concluded in 2023, was an unexpected success story. And I would just like to share the results of the South African trial with all of the 28 companies that participated in it. We saw the business outcomes aligned to what we've seen in global trials. Improvements on productivity, 49%. Revenue rising on average, 10.5% across the sample. Workability improving 49%. Absenteeism reducing by 9%. Health and well-being, again, similar data to what I've just shown you, 50% drop in burnout, 36% drop in fatigue, those feelings of less stress, reported improvements in sleep. So all of these positive impacts in a developing country that was in the middle of the biggest energy or load shedding crisis that we've ever experienced. So in spite of the socioeconomic backdrop that is South Africa, we still managed, as the organizations which mirrored many of the international pilots, to achieve similar results. There were differences, but the overall results were the same. So really, impact on business, impact on health, and impact on well-being, all of which here, health and well-being are all your flourishing markers, tell a very, very strong story. But for me, perhaps one of the most heartwarming stories is by far the case study for Stellenbosch University. And I'm not sure how familiar you are. There's Harvard and then there's Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch is an iconic university in South Africa. Ali and I have many conversations around something called the Stellenbosch Mafia. It's an Afrikaans organization, and it is very much sort of belonging in the old guard, but it has got a very, very high status symbol in South Africa, and it is by far the biggest university with the highest number of students on campus. And they have the largest student affairs and students center for counseling and development, and a very, very visionary leader. And I would like to just share the top line results of this particular case study. So they approached me and the South African nonprofit to solve some specific problems. So Charles Davids, the director, came to me with a team on the brink of burnout due to the pressure of students seeking the psychosocial intervention, bearing in mind that South African students come from a very, very diverse backdrop. So we can have someone that has managed to get a matric or a high school qualification and is qualified for a university entrance, but they live in a township with no running water and no electricity. And at the same end of the spectrum, other end of the spectrum, we can have a privileged student that has gone through the private schooling system. And because of our Black economic empowerment here, the universities are increasingly seeing students from impoverished backgrounds and the need for psychosocial intervention and the crises that Stellenbosch University has to face on a day-to-day basis. These 66 therapists and social workers and psychologists that work for the student center were under an enormous amount of pressure because of the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. On the other side, the university wanted to be an employer of choice. So obviously from a psychosocial perspective, working in the private sector is far more attractive to psychologists. They earn more, they experience less stress, they can have better management over their own schedules, etc. Working at the Stellenbosch Student Center is a 24/7 crisis job. He said that flexibility was almost non-existent, and I think that's sort of a broader story of the university as well. But within his team, staff morale and wellness needed to be improved. So we did a visioning workshop, and we called their gift day the snail day or a snail pace day. I won't say that in Afrikaans, but they were quite an Afrikaans organization, so they gave it a nickname. And they had the most astonishing results. So I'll give you the top line ones before I give you the real kicker. So they had a 75% reduction in sick leave over the trial period. The March sick leave was astonishing. So in South Africa, we have 4 terms. So universities start now, shortly, and we have a housing crisis. There's never enough student accommodation. There's more students demanding places than there are places available, and everybody is on high alert and dealing with a crisis as the universities go back to work. And as a result, March is a major sick leave month. And this decreased by 88% from when you compare it to the previous year. So not only were Charles' staff not burnt out, they were not taking leave. So they were better able to serve the student body as a result. The sessions that they conducted reduced by 16%. The hotline calls, which is obviously crisis, inbound crisis calls, and unfortunately, again, our socioeconomic background, we've got murder, rape, theft. We've got gangs working in the area. I mean, for those, I'm not doing a really good job of promoting South Africa here, but nonetheless, the hotline metric was the crisis metric. So, and it's an external spend. And as a result of not having to field continuous crisis calls, the spend on outsourced consultants and psychologists decreased by 38%. And just over 6 months, it actually was closer to 1.7 million rands worth of saving in the first 6 months of the trial data last year. And then obviously all of the warm fuzzy and flourishing things, the work-life balance, exercise, sleep, mental health, etc., all improved. But the most astonishing result of this particular trial was the reduction in student wait time. We went from an average wait time of 3 months to access psychosocial services to 3 weeks, which is comparative to private sector data. So the 4-day week, also empowered by Ali's incredible data, allowed this 66 strong student center to change their entire ecosystem from struggling into some flourishing areas. And I'll let Ali unpack a little bit more of that data with you. Just summarize quickly, what did they get that day? What did they use it for? Family time, personal well-being, relaxation, increase in household tasks, hobbies and crafts, exercise, and learning new skills. I'm going to skip that slide. And I'll share this afterwards, Karen, so that you can share it with the audience today. But I think Charles always says to me that the most significant thing for him, other than the fact that there was no negative impact on service delivery, and in fact the opposite was true, was when he walked down the corridors of the various student centers located across the campus, and he asked the question, "How are you?" Within the trial period, staff started sharing, instead of replying in work terms, "Oh, I'm fine and I'm about to get that brief done," or "I'm fine," and whatever, they started sharing stories about how they were spending their time off. And the entire dynamic within the team changed, the retention improved, everything. So the qualitative sort of insights that underpinned this trial were quite significant. So I'm going to hand over to Ali after just 2 reflections, but I'm going to stop screen sharing now. And just to close before I hand across to Ali, I think for me, I'm not a flourishing expert at all, and I'm definitely moving into it as a learning area. But there are a couple of things that for me, and in my organization, I internalize and what a 4-day week can support from a flourishing perspective. So healthy, supportive and meaningful relationships are absolutely central to flourishing and well-being. And I think a shorter work week gives individuals more time to strengthen those personal and professional connections. You know, organizations definitely report teamwork and camaraderie, less stress and engaged. Another one for me is purpose and meaning. And for me, having a sense of purpose and alignment with my values and that extra time outside of work with the 4-day week allows me to engage and employees to engage in meaningful activities, whether it's volunteering, spending time with family or loved ones. And organizations get the uptick of attracting purpose-driven employees and emphasizing quality over quantity, which is absolutely critical. The third point I'd like to make is autonomy and agency. 4-day week is bottom up, not top down in its approach. So we foster growth and well-being because the shift to productivity and trust gives employees greater control over how they manage their time, and they feel more respected and more valued and prioritized over the previous rigid work structures. And then just the last one for me, really, other than resilience and bounce back, is optimism and hope. And this is what, for me, the 4-day week and flourishing epitomizes. It's that forward-looking attitude that supports well-being and success. So it's a hopeful vision for the future. And really, the SHAPE framework helps us understand that flourishing isn't a single metric. We are able to show an organization as a living, breathing set of data here that you can introduce interventions and turn the needle on struggling areas. It's a multidimensional experience, and I really would be delighted for you, Ali, to take the audience through the Stellenbosch data.
Thank you. How can you not fall in love with Karen's energy? That's why she's the Chief Energy Officer for Human Energy.
Landing planes.
And guys, I'm just going to have a really nice, easy conversation with you. I'm going to show you a handful of things, and I'll try to wrap up in just a handful of minutes, 10 minutes max. So we've got time for some Q&A. Shape itself out, which if I can just preface, we asked ourselves the question about 7 years ago, what affects work, how much, and why? And if we can find the answer to those things, we can unlock at a practical level the levers that you yourself, your team leader, and the organizational leadership can pull those levers in order to effect the necessary change. Change is an important word because we're actually all change makers. That's why we're all here. Flourishing is at the base level of where it's going to be in the world today. And I say base level because around in around 2 months' time or so, we will be seeing a lot of valuable proof point and evidence coming from the Harvard Howard Global Flourishing study that will be, without a shadow of a doubt, proving that there is incredible value in the world if we can all move towards flourishing. But to do that, what I've learned is to make this work, we need different angles, we need different perspectives. So when the previous CEO, Dale Wellahan and Karen both came to me and we struck up a friendship, I realized that they labeled it differently, but they were all aiming at the same thing, flourishing. And time, when you ask me, I'm nearly 50 years old, I can tell you the one currency that means the most to me is giving that time not for me, for myself, but giving it to the ones I love the most. And that's something that we see again and again. That currency is so valuable. How do we get that back? And the last thing I'll say just before I lead us in, about a year ago, I was on quite a hostile podcast that never got published, thankfully. And the podcast host said to me, so I see you're an advocate for 4-day week. Why on earth would you believe in something that's been, so fantastical? So I asked him a question back, which I'll relate back to you guys, which is, what the heck is your problem, man? You're hearing that you can have your Friday behave like your Saturday and Sunday, and you got a problem with that? Somebody's gifting you an opportunity to make that day more valuable so you can remember it for the things that you did. There's a fantastic researcher called Kahneman who creates something called the peak end rule. It's what you do at the top of the day and what you do at the end that leads you to remember, the most fantastic things. And now you've got 3 days out of 7 that's going to give you that. Why is that a problem? So the real answer comes from helping people understand what the levers are we got to pull. So let me just take you through a couple of slides. Now, this is going to be difficult to narrate without a whole bunch of honesty. So I'm going to show you a handful of slides. I'm not going to take you through the whole things, but it's people reaching their full potential through the conditions and experiences, or we say behaviors, that enable optimal performance, fulfillment, and growth. Conditions and behaviors are practical things that we can start to touch and feel. So what we've done is we've started to look at those. Now, it's incredibly difficult to get any organization to tell you what their scores are to display them to the world. We owe Charles Davis an incredible thanks for his courage and his leadership for saying, you know what, my results aren't the best in the world and they don't show the most amazing flourishing, but it's about the human journey that he's on and he's really leading it, in the best possible way. I can't thank him enough for that. I'll show you a handful of things. So I'm just going to show you a couple of things here. This is what we measure within Shape, and our job is to contribute to an honest, audit-driven view of where an organization is to those factors that contribute towards ultimately flourishing at work. That means your physical health has to be in the best possible place, along with your psychological health, your life balance, job satisfaction, engagement, your commitment, your co-workers' dynamics, so your relationship with your co-workers, your manager's style, the culture, some various essentials that make a business, the physical work environment and the soft work environment. This is the God's honest truth view of what Stellenbosch was facing. And if I told you just 2 weeks ago when Karen and I were speaking, they had a couple of murders that they had to deal with in Stellenbosch. Their reality is very different to us privileged in our world. And that's an almost everyday occurrence that they're dealing with. So if it was my organization dealing with things, I would be expecting a heck of a worse psychological health. Let's dig into the psychological health. It's gone up ever so slightly. And there's a value to this because that score of 68 is not anywhere near 100. They're actually physically losing 18 weeks in a year worth of value for not being in the best possible place. We can start to look at some various demographics here so we can see which demographic groups require the most help in various areas. And we can also,
Allie,
yep,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there any way to zoom in just a little bit so we can see your screen just a little? Okay, thank you.
Is that
Perfect.
a little bit better? Okay,
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
sure. What we're also seeing here is we're looking at the depression, the anxiety, and the stress levels in the organization right now. So this is just for 30 people across the group, but it tells you a reasonable picture. And we can dig deeper into each of those areas because we can see for the organization what was holding them back. This is asking the question, I suffer from physical and or mental health issues as a result of stress. So what we see over here is the 3 markers of stress as per the depression, anxiety, stress scale. What we don't want to do is that to fall down because the impact is high when that score comes down. So we need some offsetting work over there. So it leads you over there. Adaptability is another area Charlotte and I talk about. In order to effect change, we all need to invest in adaptability skills to get people from A to B. Because we're going to disrupt them positively or negatively, but we're going to disrupt what they're doing. So they have to be better prepared. Now, I won't go through all of this. I'm going to show you something a little bit different to help you orient some of the other type of scoring that we do. So we create a headline report afterwards, and you can see over here where they were last time and where they are now. So there were 2 touch points. One was in May 2024, and then we took the last count just a month ago. And we can see there is struggling. There is striving, and there's actually a drop in flourishing as well. This is the God's honest true nature of what's going on inside just the handful of people there. We'll dig deeper into that. I won't go through everything here, but you can see, what the ENPS score looks like, same metrics over here, time and money. Now, this is an important factor because this is, I'll show you a couple of new things that we're doing to link the time story into the context of flourishing in a deeper way. And this is not released to the world, so you'll get a little bit of a preview here. Now what we do is we start to look at which areas or factors and drivers, we call them, where the whole group of people are struggling and therefore allow us to start to dig deeper into supporting them. And we can see that over here. And if I dig deeper just a little bit over here, morale, management style, morale of colleagues, decisiveness, being responsible with power, being rewarded, and salaries. By the way, I've not yet met a company anywhere on the planet that we've done the SHAPE survey with where they all believe they're being sufficiently paid. Even the most highest paid organizations, still the people believe that they're not being paid well enough. So we always put a pinch of salt on that one. And what we're able to do is we're able to start to look at where the declines are. People proposing new ideas. Family care, unfortunately, was an area that was still a bit of a drop compared to last time. Diversity, reporting lines, and supportive co-workers. But I also want to take your attention to here some of the bigger wins. They felt they had a better support network. They were satisfied with their role that much more. Now this is telling a bit of a picture that supports Karen's points. And you've got sufficient resources, co-workers confront issues effectively, and workplace support is there. I won't go into too much detail on this one. I'll just show you very quickly. Everything is measured. So they can really dig into the detail. And this is where the real story starts coming out. It's these areas here: policy compliance, reliable co-workers, satisfaction with role. Here's what they're really starting to focus on, so we can start to take more practical action on the back of this. And the last thing I'll just quickly show you is this is brand new. This is work behind the scenes we're doing to actually build a time impact report. And it's all about making sure that when we are compressing that time, in the time available, we're able to do that much more. And we're able to tell that story more effectively, literally the number of hours and the amount of dollar value that's coming from this. And this is government quality data that we're linking into with multiple governments around the world. So we can start to dig deeper. But the one I will show you very quickly is what's available. So you can reduce absenteeism another 3 weeks. There's value to avoiding attrition, and there's also presenteeism value that you can gain back. And then we break it down bit by bit by bit. What's it worth? And this is why this report has caught the attention of a number of people around the world, where they would like us now to actually help have this data to help them contribute towards the slide that Karen passed you through very quickly and jumped over, actually is linking data that goes to government regulatory compliant level submissions. So that's what we're also working together on behind the scenes, is how do we help organizations make sure that they can help their strategy get lined up with regulation at the government level. I promised I will stop to leave 10 minutes, so I will pause there, and hopefully that gives you a good enough flavor.
Thanks very much, Ali. Just to let you know that there was a huge upheaval towards the later half of last year. It wasn't just all the incidents taking place on campus. There was also a resignation in a key leadership position in student affairs. And Charles is the director of the Student Center and was asked to stand up as acting head of student affairs, and he actually turned it down. So there was a lot of political shenanigans and what have you at play last year, undoing a lot of all the wonderful work that we saw. But just in closing, before we go over to questions, the Stellenbosch University results have now been taken to an industry body in South Africa called SAGI, which is the organization that represents all 26 universities in South Africa and a number of African universities as well. And we are going to be running the first sector trial for the 4-day week in the university student centers and affairs centers. That is due to start in June this year. So really looking to understand and having Ali's data both as a baseline as well as being able to measure how the trial is going for all 26 universities across South Africa. So hopefully in a year from now, Ali and I will be back talking to you about the sector trial data with all of the shape metrics and all of the glory. But thank you all so much, and Karen, for the invites. If there are any questions, Ali, thank you for jumping in with the data as well. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you to both of you. Des and Marie had a couple of comments and questions in the chat.
Yeah, mine was just a comment. Once again, Ali, I've seen your presentation before. And Jill, my business partner, she's on this call as well. And I talk to a lot of business leaders, executives at American corporations. And the hesitancy is always that somehow a move to a 4-day work week will negatively impact profits. And so I think that the way that you presented the data here, Ali, is a powerful business case. And we need to see more of that if we want to see meaningful movement in the American business landscape. my humble opinion. So I just wanted to say thank you for putting that together so concisely.
I couldn't agree more.
You know, I have a question, and I think this will come through time, but it might be really powerful to also segment the data and the reports to show companies that have, you know, how are they solving for this with their frontline workers versus knowledge workers versus, you know, because I think, Ollie, you and I have experienced a relationship with a client where they keep insisting that they can't possibly consider a 4-day work week given their unique nature of, you know, volunteers and weird hours and all those kinds of things. So I just think like having more data kind of point to, yes, this is where office workers work and this is how they solve for it, but also, you know, telling the CHRO of Tyson Chicken that people still have to come in and cut heads off chickens. How do you make that work with 4 days and so on? So anyway, I think having data show a diversity of application would be quite helpful.
Yeah, Marie, we do have that. It's just whether clients allow us to show it or not. A lot of the success stories are actually behind the scenes, and it's clear, guarded secrets. Let's not let them out the vaults and teach other people, because it's a competitive advantage for many organizations that have successfully transitioned. But you know what, anyone that asks you that question again, if it can work in the city of Golden Police Department, it can work just about anywhere. And Perpetual Guardian, the founding partners, was a customer-facing business. So not only did it have its online services, it had frontline branches that were serving customers. So we've seen it work across manufacturing to police academies, to social housing, to hospitals. We do have case studies. I had no idea how to slice and dice the data, so I could get it all across to you in one go. So hopefully we can send some more, and perhaps we can connect and I can share some more of the data that we actually do have available on a more granular level.
I'll follow up with Karen's contact info too. It's in the chat. And we have Amelia and Rachel and Julian all also have questions. Amelia, you want to jump in?
Oh, thanks, Karen. So that was fantastic. I have a background as a corporate lawyer, and then I was most recently working at Bain, the consulting firm. And both of those are obviously client-facing professional services firms. And so exactly to Marie's point, like I think it's really interesting and important to segment the data into kind of like sectors. But then also I had two questions. The first is, how feasible is it for employees to actually have buy-in into this when they're incentivized to work more for, like, say, bonuses, promotions, things like that? For example, as a lawyer, you are tracked every 6 minutes, and in consulting, your rate is daily. So I wanted to know how that worked. And then kind of like a related question is, based on that affecting businesses' top lines, how do you get business leaders to buy into it as well?
Difficult. The joy of the billable hour. And it's not just in your hands, it's in clients' hands, and the perception of the worth of the billable hour, whether you're in management consulting or law. But the law industry is very, very interested in the 4-day week for one reason, because overwork is prevalent and burnout is high. So unfortunately, within environments like that, it's typical of marketing communications environments, high levels, high hours, billable hours, high outputs required. You really are challenging a status quo in the very ecosystem of how a law firm works. That said, there are many successful law firms that have pivoted and seen success. There are also law firms in different areas and different disciplines that tend to function better with a 4-day week than others. So it also depends what kind of law you're in. So again, Amina, you're very welcome to reach out to me and we can have a discussion. We actually hosted a webinar last year, which was, can a 4-day week work in law? And we had a couple of very, very divisive opinions and sort of discussions around the topic. The answer is yes, it can. But there are many factors and variables that you need to consider, one of which is the inherent value of the time of the billable hour and what it's worth to the client, because it's managing the outside of the ecosystem, not just the billable hour and your career mobility as a result. It's a broken system. It rewards overwork. burnout's an occupational hazard. It's one of those things. You can't get out the industry. And I don't think that's fair. There are more sustainable ways of working. Sorry, your second question was?
It's okay. I'm conscious of time, so you can move on to Rachel. Thanks, Karen.
Please email me, Amelia.
Amelia, I'm thinking about the compliance-based industries and how there's the great data about physicians, and I think it's prescribing physicians making fewer mistakes. But
yes.
I think lawyers and consultants never want to say they make mistakes. So I mean, it would be a business risk for them. I'm curious. Thank you. This has been fascinating. The few organizations, you didn't say it works for 100% of organizations. Are there any factors driving those, that percentage of organizations who have tried this and decide that it doesn't work for them?
Yes, by far the biggest reason for failure is top down, not bottom up. So leader decides and then puts the framework in place, as opposed to co-created and bottom up, which you don't get the buy-in. The other reason for it not working, where we've seen clients pull out of a trial, is a leadership change. So new broom sweeps clean, new decision makers come in. But by far, the reason for not succeeding is not going through the pre-planning and onboarding phase. We run a significant program that educates organizations on how to approach and get trial ready. And then we run a trial support program for the 6 months with ongoing intervention. And we find that organizations, and this again happened in the German trial, the ones that did not succeed completed less than 2 of the 10 onboarding sessions, and they were the culprits. So it's a mixture of understanding how to approach it, understanding that every company is unique, and also ensuring that the employees are engaged in the process, because it actually is it's an enormous undertaking. And very often as well, the rollout needs to be not company-wide. So if you've got a massive bank, I always say, don't try it at head office. Go and pick your worst performing branch in the middle of nowhere and go and see how it works there. So they also need to test in areas that are not typical.
Karen and Allie, do you have a couple more minutes, or do you have a hard stop?
Happy to stay on.
Okay. Julian, you want to jump in? Oh, Julian has to run, but his question was around how does the hybrid and work from home and return to work and such?
I mean, I've got 30 seconds, but yeah, is it potentially taking the wind out of the sails of the 4-day work week when organizations are now allowing their employees to work from home, and they're saying, well, we're giving up this, and I can just see or hear my own clients going, well, we're already doing this, so why would we go to a 4-day work week? So yeah, I was just wondering if, Karen, you'd had any impact or if that is happening.
Julian, all of these misconceptions exist. It's not so much about the return to office conflict and the debates around flexible work and where you work and all of the rest of it. It's creating the right environment for your employees to produce their outputs effectively. And you need to ask yourself, under what circumstances does that require a hybrid model or a full return to office mandate, or whether it can be completely remote. And I think organizations are hiding behind enormous rentals that they need to pay for properties that they've rented and empty offices, and are also, I think there are lots of, conspiracy theories and what have you, but there is a massive pushback around how are you measuring productivity. I'm not hearing the arguments for there has been a drop in productivity and I can prove it by X, Y, and Z. They just make blanket sweeping statements, and it doesn't help the cause. But you know what? There's the old guard, Julian, and I don't spend my time trying to convince people that because they're paying an enormous rent on that building and they want to see their staff, and because they're busy, they're at their computer, they are busy and producing work. If that is the perception of the leader, then they are not a client of 4-day week, and they are not an early adopter, and they will miss out on the opportunity to improve flourishing within their organization. And we can convince one company at a time, but to scale, I'm not challenging the old guard. They will move over at some point and the tipping point will come. So I think we're debating the wrong thing. Flourishing and how we create spaces and environments for that to happen is where we need to be placing our focus. And shorter work weeks, you know what, you can tell and share the data over and over again. I can show a police department another case study of a police department thinking it will work, and they'll go, oh, well, City of Golden doesn't look like me, they don't behave like me, they don't act like me, therefore it won't work. And it's up to leadership perception and what perception they have of time and how much control and micromanagement there is prevalent within the organization. And ask them how they're measuring productivity and performance. In the knowledge work environment, my goodness, I cannot get a straight answer. It's almost impossible.
Right.
So it's a very interesting debate, one which we could spend another 2 hours on. I love it. Very divisive. But thanks for the question, Julian.
Thanks, Karen. I got to run.
Thanks, Julian. Do we have time for 2 more?
Yeah, go for it. I'm fine.
Okay. Maren, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do. So over at MIT and Harvard, there are also some groups working on the 4-day work week. There's a lot of traction momentum. I love the worker well-being focus. But one of the things I haven't heard addressed in any of these discussions is, what about alternative models? Like, I think of industries like education where maybe, distributive practice is better. And so maybe 5 or 6 days of shorter hours is better for the learner. And there's other industries perhaps like that. And so, and some cultures have like the siesta and they take, multiple hours in the middle of the day. So how is that addressed in the 4-day work week worker well-being push?
So, Marion, I think there are 2 industries that we're seeing an increasing interest from. One is nursing and the other one is teaching. And I think they're both ecosystems that, again, have legacy issues, are losing skills. There's a massive increase in talent loss within the teaching and nursing environments, particularly so in South Africa as well. But I think the education ecosystem is also quite a hard one to disrupt, like law. That said, we are seeing institutions experimenting with it. And as a result of the Stellenbosch trial, not only is the Student Affairs Department going to be doing it, but a couple of the faculties are looking to get involved. So they're going to start experimenting with shorter work weeks. But I think one of the things that's working against us from a teaching perspective is the fact that more often than not, dual income households these days. So you've got the parent body to also consider in shortening the work week. So I think distributive models are definitely the way of the future. What we're trying to
my question is about, for the worker, is it about the 4 days or is it about fewer hours per week?
It is the shorter work week. And I think I prefaced that at the start of my conversation. It's not about a day off. It is about reducing the average work week and redesigning it so that you are able to deliver on what you already deliver on. So you're not compromising service delivery. So, in South Africa, it could be hours off every day. It could be 2 half days. It could be a Wednesday. It could be a Friday. It could be a Monday. You start with what are the outputs and then ask yourself, under what circumstances can this be delivered in a 32-hour work week? And you have to challenge yourself as an organization and in your role to find the solution to the answer to that question. And education is no different to any other industry sector. If there are entrenched practices, as an employee, you know the benefits of time off. From a teaching perspective, being more present with kids, having more time to mark, doing better work. There's so many advantages to the shorter work week. But if the school body prescribes that and the students are on campus and need the care, then how are you going to reduce the teaching hours without increasing additional hours somewhere else to keep looking after the kids that are still on campus or still on school site? So there are so many nuances to this conversation. But I think employees are pushing, and teaching is one of the industries, as I said, and nursing. They're pushing for a change. And somebody has to experiment, get the data, refine it, and present it back. And we have a couple of case studies. And before we know it, there are the early adopters that have shown that there's a way forward. We do have a couple of teaching or institutions, schools that have participated. So happy again, please email me and I'm happy to take you through some of the data.
Thanks.
So Marie logged off, but I think what she was making a point in the chat was just the language that is used, the branding of the 4-day, perhaps
Oh, yes.
people to make the assumption that that's what it is rather than the variability of the schedule. And Chase, did you have a question? Thanks for patiently waiting.
Oh, yeah. And thanks for staying on. So I downloaded one of the reports. I'm looking at the assessing global trials data. And so I was curious because a lot of, I really work at that intersection of health and well-being. And so everything is self-reported data. I'm curious if there is a plan to eventually try to map it with validated data, like looking at biometrics, looking at claims data, looking at actual health outcomes. It says, generic well-being outcomes. It strongly suggests it has the potential, but I was wondering maybe if you had an idea of where that might be on the roadmap to try to intersect that data.
That's exactly why Ali and I are in the same room, and exactly why 4-Day Week Global and Shape are partnering up to have a look and see how we can use more scientific and evidence-based data. And our other European partners are challenging their local universities and academic institutions to add on to the scope of research. So it's not just reported data. So absolutely, we've got our Norwegian contingent looking at wearables and working with a partner there. French Lyon University, Professor Mark Smith and his team also looking to bring in more scientific and evidence-based results. So, Ali and the Shape diagnostic and system is just world-class, and having access to that data in sort of real time, and as we move through the trial will give us much more sort of scientific rigor to the research reports. We've proven it works from a reported perspective. It's now time to prove it scientifically. So that is our aim, and it's this year. We can't delay any longer.
That may segue really well into Paul Zach, who's joining us in February, who looks at, he's presenting on neurobiology and wearables and measuring emotional fitness. And
oh, 6, yes.
Yes, 6. So I hope you can all join us. Thank you for the discussion and for staying on, Eileen and Chase and Rachel and Des. Do you have another question?
Just a comment on the previous topic. So I have a real life example, Karen. At my last corporate full-time job, we focused on flexibility. And what we did, this was our experiment. We had a 4-day work week every other week. And then we introduced core blocks on when we needed employees to be online, but created flexibility around that block for our employees. And what we found was really interesting. First of all of our competitors, we had the highest engagement and retention rates. We found that very quickly. But secondly, we had some people who chose to work on those Fridays that were what we call them was mind days, and people could do whatever they wanted with their time. Some people chose to work on Fridays because they were working on a project, something interesting, something that they didn't want to break from, and others took those days off consistently and took blocks during the week to take care of their kids, take them to soccer, whatever it was that their needs were. So I found that the needs of our employees were very specific, and by introducing the option to do either or both, if they were so efficient that they would, and we had to be very, very clear about deliverables and goals and what we expected them to contribute. And people kind of chose their own journey, and that was very effective for us at the time. And so I just wanted to share that in the context
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful stories from around the world. And I think to close, Ali and I have had so many discussions around this, as have my team. But 4-day week is understood fundamentally at an internal level as a human being. I understand the concept of working 4 days a week instead of 5, and I love the idea of it. But it does send some businesses, or many businesses, running for cover. And I think what we're going to do this year is lean more into the employee experience of I like the idea of working less and delivering the same, and offering more sort of education and awareness and evidentiary programs to actually de-risk this for business, because I think that's a critical component of it. And it's not about the 4-day week. It is about challenging our very relationship that we have with time and outputs. And that's what we're trying to do. You know, and it's we'll change it one company at a time. More than happy. I'm in this for the long haul. It's a wonderful path and a wonderful journey towards flourishing. So, but Karen, thank you so much for having us both. Ali, for jumping in with your time as well. I'm very grateful, and for everyone that took the time to listen today.
We really appreciate it. Thank you. This was a fantastic discussion. It seems to follow common sense, just like you said. It intuitively makes sense, but we appreciate that you're collecting the data to continue to influence organizations.
Well, thank you for having me, and have a wonderful day, all of you, further, and evening, if that's applicable. And I look forward to seeing you next month. I'll be in the audience.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day and evening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.